thank you all for joining us this morning for today's webinar. We're going to be covering how to sell smarter and how to target more effectively as a manufacturer operating in today's food service environment. Let's see, to begin, my name is Marie Moldy. I'm head of product marketing at Data Central. I've worked at Data Central for about 7 years, working with manufacturers and operators on various innovation and sales support initiatives, and I'm excited to share some insights with you all to begin today's webinar. I'm joined by my colleague, Jody. Jody, could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, folks. I'm Jody Healy. I look after sales in EMEA, so the commercial side. My background has been always in data and insights, so the likes of Euromonitor, Intels, and IWSRs. Yes, and I'm really happy to present with Marie this morning. So I look forward to chatting in a bit.
Yes, awesome. Thank you. So let's see, just one note of housekeeping before we begin our content today. So you'll notice that the chat is disabled for today's webinar. You won't be able to reach us or reach the other attendees through the chat, but you can reach us through the Q&A function, and we'd love to hear from you there. If you have any questions, please type them in, and we'll be sure to get back to you with the answers. So taking a look at our agenda for the next half an hour, we're going to begin with some food service industry and consumer insights. So at Data Central, we have a few different products geared toward the European food service landscape and helping our customers to sell smarter and really understand what's going on and know what consumers are wanting and thinking from food service suppliers and operators. So we'll share some industry insights from Data Central's European food service related reports, and also some industry insights from our global sales intelligence platform that tracks every food service location across 32 different European countries. We'll then go into the sales journey. So this whole notion of how do you sell smarter? How do you find targets easier, more efficiently? Jody's going to take us through what that process looks like. So it's about a 6 or 7 phase process, and we'll walk you through exactly Data Central's recommended approach for selling more effectively in food service. And then we'll end with what you have. So by following this process, what is it going to give you? How are your results going to improve? And really, what can you look forward to when you follow this recommended approach? So let's begin with those foundational insights. So this number we're looking at here, 2.2 million, is the number of restaurants that Data Central tracks across the European food service landscape. So specifically, we track 32 different countries across Europe, and together with chains and independent restaurants, that represents over 2.2 million operators. So, of course, that's a huge number. It can be kind of hard to maybe grasp that or really gain meaningful insights from the overall landscape. So what we've done for the purposes of our time together today is really kind of focus specifically on 3 of the 32 countries and share some insights about specific to France, the UK, and Spain. So we saw that overall, there are those 2.2 million operators, but just these 3 countries alone represent almost 40% of the landscape. So a really big chunk of the restaurants across Europe are contained in these 3 specific countries: France, UK, and Spain. And let's take a deeper look into what the cuisine landscape looks like in these countries. So here we're looking at France specifically and what types of operators are in practice today or in business today across France. I think the first thing we'll notice here is that traditional French restaurants are a really big part of the overall cuisine landscape in France. And then you see quite a big drop off when it comes to the number 2 type of cuisine or number 3 with pizza and with sandwiches. 10% or 11% of the restaurants in France are those types of operators. And for today's webinar, we really thought let's pick one cuisine and let's kind of focus on that and share a lot of what we know about one specific type of restaurant. So burgers is kind of what we're going to focus in on today. And we know that burgers can be its own primary cuisine at a restaurant. A restaurant can certainly specialize in burgers. And when it comes to the French restaurant landscape, 5% of restaurants in France are that primary burger-focused type of operator. But we also know that restaurants can offer burgers, even if they're a different type of restaurant, like a sandwich restaurant or an Italian restaurant. And when we look at the data that way, it's 30%, or about 1 in 3 restaurants in France offers burgers on their menu. So quite a leap there when you look at the 5% that are primarily burger focused, and then it bumps up to 30% of those who simply have a burger on offer on their menu. So let's compare that to Spain. So this data looks a bit similar. We can see that traditional Spanish restaurants are the primary cuisine type across Spain. Then we find sandwiches and Mediterranean restaurants are also common. And in Spain, burger restaurants are a little less common. It's 3% of the overall landscape. And as is the notion of having a burger on a different type of menu, where 20%, or about 1 in 5 restaurants across Spain, will offer a burger on their menu. And then lastly, let's look at the United Kingdom. So this is a bit different than France and Spain, where sandwiches is that #1 type of operator. It's not the traditional restaurants. It is sandwich restaurants are the most common. Coffee shops are also quite common across the UK at 12% of the overall mix. And then burger restaurants, they're most prevalent in the UK. 9% of restaurants in the UK are burger focused, and then 28% of restaurants in the overall landscape offer burgers. So it's one thing to understand, and it's of course very important to understand what the overall cuisine landscape looks like. When you're a manufacturer looking to sell into a country, it's important to know what restaurants are there and how your product might fit into their business. It's also important to understand how the restaurant landscape is changing, and especially what new types of restaurants are opening, and how can we maybe get in early with these types of businesses, or understand the trend of what operators are commonly opening in an area, so we can think about how our products can get onto those menus. So looking specifically at burgers again, if we look at restaurant openings last year, 7% of the overall restaurant openings in France last year were burger-focused restaurants. 5% of openings in the UK were burger focused, and just 1% of restaurant openings in Spain last year were burger focused restaurants. And it's really interesting to compare this restaurant opening and restaurant landscape data to consumer sentiment data, because here we find we've asked consumers in these 3 countries, have you eaten a burger either in a restaurant, at home, or somewhere else in the past month? And we can see that across the board, it's the majority of consumers in each country have had a burger. And it's especially likely in Spain. It's 79% of Spanish consumers have had a burger in the past month. And we just saw that burgers are actually less common in Spain right now than they are in the UK and France. So there's an interesting, almost bit of a disconnect there. And when we look to see, so we know that people are eating burgers, whether it's at home or in food service or somewhere else. So we wanted to dive deeper there and see where are the burger occasions most common. And we find that it really is in food service, and that away from home restaurant setting, that 54% of consumers in France and Spain, and about half of consumers in the United Kingdom, are having their burgers in a restaurant. So that food service operator location is where consumers are primarily going to have their burgers and satisfy their burger cravings. And the trend is also moving upward. So here we've asked consumers by these 2 channels, delivery and out-of-home eating occasions, are you consuming more burgers through delivery or from out-of-home experiences? And you read this as 19% of consumers in the UK are having more burgers through delivery this year, or 30% of consumers in the UK and Spain are having more burgers outside the home. So certainly that trend for burgers in a food service setting is increasing. And then price is always an important part of this. As you know, we're thinking about getting our products on the menu at new operators. We want to know, can they command a premium? What type of price can an operator expect if they put our products on their menu? So we've asked consumers, what's the average amount of money you pay for a burger in these 3 countries? So in France, it's about €8.50. In the UK, it's about maybe closer to £7. These numbers may seem a little low, and that is likely and largely that the burger occasion is so often in a fast food setting or a quick service setting. So these prices do skew a little lower because they are oftentimes in that fast food type environment. And when we look closer at this data, we also find that there's a big regional skew. So if you take the UK, for example, the average price a consumer told us they'd pay for a burger in Northern Ireland was €10. And in the Eastern UK, it was as low as £4.50. So it really does vary regionally. So as a manufacturer, you know, thinking, where your product ends up on the menu, it will likely command a different price in a different region of each country as well. And then thinking of what consumers really want from a burger experience, really 2 items stand out here. They want it to be good and hearty and kind of satisfying and satisfy their hunger and really feel like a satisfying meal. And they also want it to have quality ingredients. So there is some interest in items like being quick or being inexpensive or maybe looking beautiful, but those last 3 really don't come at all as close as the idea of having it be a hearty meal and having it made with quality ingredients. So before I turn things over to Jody, I wanted to share, just thinking about, we've seen the prevalence of burger restaurants. We've seen the prevalence of burgers across menus of other types of restaurants. We've heard what consumers want from burgers across these 3 countries in particular. So thinking about the size of the opportunity as well is, of course, important. So in France, the equivalent of almost 1 billion burgers are consumed per year, and the far majority of them, 77%, are eaten in food service. So again, it's restaurants are satisfying the need for burgers for consumers today. In the UK, it's even more. It's 1.2 billion burgers are consumed per year, and 70% of them eaten in food service. And in Spain, it's 1 billion burgers, and 71% of them come from food service. So now we're going to ask you to please kind of put yourself in the hat of someone maybe looking to sell into burger restaurants or thinking about how you can do this most effectively. So I'll turn things over to Jody, and he's going to share with us the sales journey and really walking us through how to effectively do this process.
Thanks, Marie. So I think one of the things we're going to look at is going to take a look at the sales intelligence platform, which is a global operator database, which Marie obviously sort of alluded to at the beginning. And the point of this is to highlight, one, the overall addressable market for a business, but also identify how, for salespeople, they can be more efficient and more targeted in the actual sales process that they follow. So we've created a sort of fictional business here, so Bob's World of Cheese. And if you think about the goals of what Bob is trying to do or looking to do, Bob's World of Cheese is looking to become the #1 cheese supplier in a selection of markets. And as the database sort of covers 9 million operators, over 9 million operators actually globally, it's the perfect source of information to help Bob's World of Cheese identify those people that are most likely to buy their products. So a bit of background on Bob's World of Cheese. We're about a 50 million revenue business, fairly aggressive growth targets, sort of 15, 20% growth targets. And their aim is trying to make their sales teams as efficient as possible. So this is one of those situations where if you think about a business and they have sales teams on the ground, and the French market being a particularly strong market for this type of cheese company, they really want to make sure that those sales individuals are going with a better understanding to the right types of companies that are most likely to purchase their products. So when we think about the types of establishments that this type of cheese company is going to look for, burger restaurants are going to be big on the agenda. So everything Marie was just talking to, it is relevant to a much stronger narrative for salespeople. And the smarter sell aspect is really about helping sales and those commercial individuals sell in smarter to those companies, build a better collaboration and a better understanding of what that operator needs, and obviously understanding that those are going to be the core targets for growth for the business. So the aim is to make sure that Bob's World of Cheese is growing, they're targeting more effectively, and the salespeople are more efficient in how they target. So if we just move into the next slide, Marie. So first things first, we sort of look at that process, whether it comes from marketing, whether it's directly from the commercial side. Ideally, you're looking to target a particular market or sectors within that market. So in this situation, we can search by region or city. You can look at postcodes. You can look at a radius, so within a 20-mile, 50-mile, 100-mile radius of within a particular area. And then you can identify particular regions. The aim of this, again, if you think about a company's sales teams, is to make sure that these guys are, one, doing the work in the right sort of timescales that they're looking for, and they also understand what their addressable market looks like. So who should they be going after, and where are these people? Next slide. And so we move from the steps. Now, if you think about this sort of journey, we're trying to highlight that the 5 or 6 steps to actually understanding what that total addressable market looks like. It would be very important to be able to segment out what you're trying to target, because, you know, Bob's World of Cheese, he has a whole range of different products, and those products can either be high-end or mass market. So the reality is we do need to identify those different target sectors. So we're able to whittle that down into particular areas of the market that allow us to pick quick service restaurants or fast casual restaurants, and then the table or full service restaurants as well, plus different areas if you're interested in accommodation or hotels. Next slide, Marie. We're also able to look at from the commercial side, so the restaurant landscape, into the non-commercial or social. Now, as a business, I would know that Bob's World of Cheese has a separate sales team that looks directly into schools, looks at prisons, looks at that other landscape, which is an entire other revenue stream, but they're unsure of what that looks like. So we can, and the database does support in key markets, the non-commercial operator landscape. So that is giving a picture of what that looks like. Again, next slide. So we've gone from commercial to non-commercial to those alternative channels, which could be, in my eyes, a sort of retail landscape, and does enable a business to break up perhaps into phases. Now, depending on the size of a business, you know, if you have thousands of salespeople or if you have 2, you may want to phase the approach about how to target most effectively. So we have our steps of selection. So we understand our market, we understand our regions or territory where we're actually looking for these businesses. We then look at segments, so we understand where we're actually most likely or we want to sell into. So that's a critical area of saying, what does that market look like for us from either the very big picture or the sort of minutiae of just a very particular category, if that's how we're going to target based on the size and shape of our business. Next slide. So after that first and second step, we move into the sort of filtering or attribute levels of what we're trying to search for. So the business size. Now this, for some, would be used less often. I think in certain situations, people are trying to understand how big are these companies, or rather these establishments, how big are they? What are their annual sales? So we can tell you that. An interesting filter or criteria is looking at the number of employees and the number of meals. So number of meals could be extremely interesting based on volume, also based on the context of pricing. So as you sort of navigate that initial conversation, if price is going to be the punchiest element in your conversation, it's very important for salespeople to have an understanding of, okay, they produce X amount of meals, or we have this amount of staff, so this amount of turnover, this amount of revenue, and this is the sort of likely salary expectations of the business whose annual sales are X. So we have our business filters. Next. We can move into our commercial attributes. Now, these are, again, interesting filters, whether they're used on the broad or the minute searches. Looking at number of units, often there are companies, particularly in Bob's World of Cheese, we sell to just the independents, so small one-shop areas, or we look at the chains as well. So the context of understanding how a business is shaped and what they're trying to figure out. So what are they trying to understand? So they may just want to be parts of the hotel chains. And so building out that target group allows you to identify better and have a more efficient sales outreach. Okay, you can look at the number of years in business, things like credit score, allowing you to be more secure in the types of businesses you're targeting. But I think most of the times people are looking at, okay, is this part of a chain? Are these independents? Or are these part of hotels? And then onto restaurant filters, please. So I think this is one of the most interesting, and really for Data Essentials history and depth of knowledge. I think when we look at things like menu type and average bill, these are elements where I think you can really hone an exercise of being efficient in targeting, but also creating the right type of companies that are most likely to purchase your products. We're talking about burgers. We're talking about in Bob's World of Cheese, we have a cheese slices, and we're very keen on understanding that particular burger universe. We can identify those, but we're also keen on the other elements. So from Central American, Caribbean foods as well. So where we can sort of identify with the right type of menu, if you think sort of one or two steps sideways or backwards, the sales individual's narrative is definitely going to change for the better if they can understand which types of menu and which types of establishment are most likely to purchase the product or product range which you offer. And by the various filters, you then have a very dynamic understanding of what the expectations are, one on the customer side, but also on the likely expectations of what you are delivering to that customer. So the filters allow for a much more efficient process of understanding your target addressable audience, but be able to actually limit that big picture market to very key areas that are way more likely to buy the products which you're offering. Okay, next slide. So after we've done those steps, so that's sort of 3-4 steps of selection and criteria selection, we then come to the results. And what it gives us is a clear, in the sort of summary format here, a clear understanding of our total addressable market. So within that full service restaurant, we have 110,496 operators who could be or would be, based on our criteria, our targets. And so we can filter these down. Again, all of this information is exportable and usable by those using the database. But the reality is we're trying to help certain parts of the business understand more clearly who our target groups are. Next slide. So in the filtering process, we can then drop that down. We may then have individuals or campaigns that are really just focused on ice creams or coffee shops or quick service restaurants. And again, in the context of Bob's World of Cheese, trying to understand those particular food service operators that are going to be more likely to purchase that product. So we then have created through our multiple segments those target groups of businesses that are more likely to purchase. Next slide. So we then dig in a little bit deeper. So we enable the users to actually look at the actual establishments themselves, so they can see obviously the name, where they are. Next slide, Marie. They can see the various details with regards to the business itself, any social media links, some of the information in and around the establishment itself. Next slide. We can also look at things like population and the densities, so active workers, status of students or employment within the area. And this is enabling more critical sort of information in and around what people are going to use to help support that sales conversation. So understanding even a purchase potential. So are these businesses spending more or less on dry, fresh, or frozen products within their establishment? So it is helping you identify more of the background, so the picture behind it. So what are those consumers like in and around those establishments? What does that competitive landscape look like? So how many operators exist in that particular area? And then what do those consumers look like as well? But also you have a clear picture of those targeted groups and what those groups look like for those salespeople to go after. Okay, so we have our sort of steps. Next slide. So from sort of start to finish, we've gone from having a goal, an aim for a business, understand what that addressable market looks like, make sure we have our sales teams being more effective and delivering our solutions to those companies, to those actual food service operators. So we've gone from our goals to now understanding a clear addressable target market. We have a much better understanding of those most likely to buy. So by those steps of segments, the filters, and understanding more about those businesses, we are much more likely to have a better narrative. We're arming our salespeople with more accurate, detailed information about those target companies. And we're giving them a much deeper knowledge of the business size and their potential to purchase. I think what's critical here is salespeople often spend a huge amount of time sourcing leads, sourcing the information that's going to support their process, and they go in underarmed with information. It becomes just a price conversation. So it actually reduces or minimizes the quality of the product which you're selling, because you're just talking about a number. And so in situations by using this type of platform, you then have a much clearer pricing strategy as well. So you can actually be much more informed about whether you go in at different levels of pricing based on your product range, based on a much better understanding. And always as well, this is saving a huge amount of time from the teams that coordinate the targeted lists for your salespeople, but also the sales individuals as well, maximizing their good quality time with individuals most likely to purchase, and minimizing that scrambling around and having conversations which are never going to work and never going to land that new customer. And finally, we've increased the leads and the likely collaboration. So we've gone from where we need to be to actually understanding almost all of our key factors and steps to take to deliver a much clearer picture of the addressable market for our sales teams and our business to hit that sort of 10-15% growth margin. And that's really it. I think I've hit the sort of 30-minute mark, so I'll pass it back to Marie.
Yeah, I think we're right on time. And I'd like to echo that. Thank you. We want to thank you all for spending a chunk of your morning with us today. And we'd love to hear from you too. If you have any questions following today's content or would like to see more of what we've talked through, you can reach us at this hello@DataCentral email. So please reach out to us there. Thank you again for joining us, and wishing you a great rest of your day today.